The massive alien ships appeared out of nowhere, blocking out the stars like giant metal monsters. The human colony ship New Dawn had been peacefully traveling through space for months, carrying 800 families to their new home on a distant planet. Children pressed their faces against the windows, watching the pretty lights of distant stars. Parents talked about the farms they would build and the schools they would create. Then everything changed in seconds. Captain Lisa Brooks was having her morning coffee when the alarms started screaming. Red lights flashed everywhere as her crew shouted reports from every station. Unknown vessels approaching fast. They're not responding to our signals. The alien ships were huge, easily 10 times larger than the human colony vessel. Dark metal hulls covered in strange symbols and weapons that glowed with deadly energy. These were Vorthan Empire warships, and they had come hunting. The attack was swift and brutal. Energy beams tore through the New Dawn's shields like paper. Explosions rocked the ship as families grabbed their children and ran for emergency shelters. But there was nowhere to hide from the boarding pods that smashed through the hull like metal fists. Vorthan soldiers poured into the ship, tall creatures with 4 arms and faces that looked like nightmares. Their skin was gray and leathery, their eyes cold as winter ice. They moved through the corridors with practiced efficiency, stunning anyone who tried to fight back with energy weapons that dropped humans like stones. Separate them by age, ordered Captain Thexmore, the raid commander. His voice sounded like grinding metal through his helmet speaker. Adults to the labor camps, young ones to the conditioning facilities. The humans begged and pleaded as families were torn apart. Dr. Rachel Peterson tried to shield her 9-year-old son Billy, but a Vorthan soldier simply pushed her aside and grabbed the boy. "Please, he's all I have left," she screamed. But her words meant nothing to creatures who saw humans as nothing more than useful animals. 10-year-old Katie Williams watched in terror as they dragged her father away. Her little brother Danny, only 7 years old, clung to her hand so tightly it hurt. Around them, other children cried and called for their parents, but the aliens showed no mercy. To the Vorthans, these were just young animals being sorted for training. "Why are they doing this?" whispered 13-year-old Alex Chun to his friend Tyler Brooks, the captain's son. Both boys had heard stories about alien slavers, but they never thought it would happen to them. "I don't know," Tyler whispered back, trying to be brave even though tears ran down his face. "But we have to stay together." The Vorthan guards found this amusing. These human children thought their friendship would save them. They had broken hundreds of species before, and young ones were always the easiest. Fear made them weak, and weakness made them obedient. 43 children, ages 6 to 15, were herded into transport cages like livestock. The metal bars hummed with energy that would shock anyone who touched them. The floor was cold and dirty, with just enough room for everyone to sit if they squeezed together. As the transport ship pulled away from the burning remains of the New Dawn, the children watched their parents through the small windows. Many adults were being loaded onto different ships, heading to work camps on distant worlds. Would they ever see their families again? Captain Thexmore studied the human young through the cage walls. They looked so small and fragile, nothing like the warrior species that had been giving the Empire trouble lately. "These will break easily," he told his lieutenant. "Human young are weak and emotional. A few days of isolation and fear, and they'll do anything we want." But the captain was wrong about something important. He understood human adults well enough, but he had never studied human children. He didn't know that young humans were not just smaller versions of adults. They were something else entirely, something that could be far more dangerous than any adult warrior. As the transport ship traveled through dark space toward mining station Omega 12, the children huddled together for warmth and comfort. Some cried quietly. Others stared at the walls with growing anger. The youngest ones asked questions that had no good answers. But even in their fear and sadness, something else was happening. These weren't random children thrown together by chance. Many had been taught skills by their parents during the long journey. Katie's mother had been a computer programmer. Tyler's father was a military officer. Alex's parents were engineers. Danny might be small, but he was incredibly smart for his age. The Vorthans thought they had captured weak, young animals. They had no idea they had just made the biggest mistake in their empire's history. The transport ship finally reached its destination after 3 long days in space. Mining Station Omega, 12 sat on the surface of a dead moon like a giant metal spider, all sharp edges and glowing lights. The children pressed against the windows, staring at what would be their prison. The moon had no air, no water, nothing but rock and metal buildings connected by covered walkways. Vorthan guards dragged them from the transport into the station's cold corridors. The air tasted funny and made their throats burn. Everything was too big for human children, built for the tall aliens who ruled this place. The walls were gray metal covered in strange symbols that hurt to look at. Warden Klexvon waited for them in the main processing area, a massive Vorthan with scars covering his face and arms. He looked at the human children, like a farmer examining new cattle. "Weak and small," he said to his assistant, speaking in their clicking language. "This will be easy." The children were separated immediately. Boys and girls went to different sections of the prison. Older kids were put in one area, younger ones in another. Each child got a tiny cell with metal walls, a hard bed, and a toilet. The doors locked with energy fields that buzzed and sparked. "This is standard procedure," Guard Captain Nextall explained to the new staff. "Keep them apart so they can't plan together. Fear and loneliness break young ones faster than anything else. In 2 weeks, they'll be begging to work just to see another face." But the Vorthans didn't understand humans at all. They had conquered dozens of other species using these same methods. Most alien young became quiet and obedient when separated from their families. The Vorthans expected human children to do the same thing. They were completely wrong. On the first night, 10-year-old Katie Williams discovered something interesting. When she tapped on her cell wall, someone tapped back. She tried different patterns, and the person on the other side copied them. Soon she realized it was her friend Megan Foster from the colony ship. Katie remembered something her computer programmer mother had taught her about binary code, using patterns of taps to represent letters. Slowly, carefully, she began teaching Megan. By morning, they could send simple messages through the walls. Tyler Brooks, the captain's son, had his own discovery. The air vents in his cell carried sounds from other parts of the prison. When he listened carefully during the quiet times, he could hear guards talking, footsteps in the corridors, even other children coughing or moving around. His father had taught him to notice patterns and timing during their long journey to the new world. Soon Tyler knew exactly when the guards changed shifts, when they brought food, when they cleaned the corridors. He started sharing this information through Katie's wall tapping code, which was spreading from cell to cell like a secret language. 7-year-old Danny Williams was too small to reach his air vent, but he had something else. During the day, when they let some children out for work duty, Danny was so quiet and tiny that the guards often forgot he was there. He could slip between their legs and hide in corners, watching and listening to everything. Danny heard the guards complaining about broken equipment. He learned their names and which ones were mean, which ones were lazy, and which ones were scared of their boss. All this information went back to the other children through Katie's growing communication network. The Vorthans saw what they wanted to see. The human children seemed quiet and obedient during the day. They worked in the mining equipment repair bays, cleaning and organizing tools. They ate their terrible food without complaining. They went to their cells at night without fighting. "See," Warden Klexvon told his staff after the first week, "human young are even weaker than we thought. Already they accept their fate. But inside those cells, something amazing was happening. 13-year-old Alex Chun had figured out how to take apart his cell's light fixture without the guards noticing. His engineer parents had taught him about electrical systems during the colony journey. Now, he was learning how Vorthan technology worked. 15-year-old Jessica Martinez, whose mother had been a teacher, was creating memory games to help the younger children remember guard schedules and prison layouts. She taught them songs that sounded innocent, but were actually coded messages about escape routes and hiding places. Even 12-year-old Billy Peterson, whose mother was a doctor, was making mental notes about which guards limped, which ones had trouble seeing in the dark, and which ones carried their weapons loosely. The children were doing something the Vorthans had never seen before. Instead of breaking down into scared individuals, they were becoming stronger as a group. Every day, they learned more about their prison, their guards, and each other. The aliens thought they were watching human young ones slowly give up hope. They had no idea they were actually watching the birth of something far more dangerous than any adult army. 3 weeks into their imprisonment, everything changed. The children had spent those weeks watching, learning, and quietly planning. Now it was time to test what they had discovered about their alien captors and their prison. It started with something small. Alex Chun was working in the equipment bay when Guard Hexton came over to check his progress. Alex had been fixing a maintenance robot, but he had secretly rewired its circuits based on what his engineer parents had taught him. When the guard touched the robot to inspect it, a powerful electrical shock knocked him flat on his back. Accident, Alex said quickly in broken Vorthen, pretending to be scared. Sorry. Machine broken. The guard cursed and stumbled away, his arm numb from the shock. The other guards laughed at him for being careless around primitive human equipment. They had no idea the accident was perfectly planned. 2 days later, Tyler Brooks caused his own accident in the food preparation area. His military father had taught him about systems and how they could fail. Tyler carefully adjusted the temperature controls on a soup dispenser while pretending to clean it. When Guard Nextall came to get his lunch, scalding hot liquid sprayed all over his uniform. "Stupid human machines!" the guard yelled, dancing around as the hot soup burned through his clothes. Again, the other guards just laughed. These primitive humans clearly didn't understand advanced technology. But the accidents weren't random at all. Each incident taught the children something new. They learned that Vorthen's skin burned easily. They discovered which guards were quick to anger and which ones were slow to react. Most importantly, they realized their captors thought humans were too stupid to be dangerous. This was their greatest advantage. Katie Williams made the next breakthrough during her cleaning duties in the administration area. She found something amazing, a computer terminal that someone had left unlocked. Her programmer mother had taught her about different types of computers, and while this one looked alien, the basic ideas were the same. Working quickly while the guards weren't watching, Katie began exploring the system. She couldn't read all the Vorthen symbols, but numbers and maps were easier to understand. She found the prison layout, guard schedules, and something incredible, the location of the main communication array. That night, through their wall-tapping network, Katie shared everything she had learned. The children now had a complete map of their prison and knew exactly when each area would be unguarded. But their biggest discovery came from an unexpected source. 7-year-old Danny Williams had been ignored by most guards because he was so small and quiet. This let him overhear conversations that older children never could. One day, he heard 2 guards talking about something that changed everything. "The human adults tried to warn us," one guard said to another. "They kept saying their young ones were dangerous. How stupid can a species be? Young ones are always the weakest." "I know," laughed the other guard. "Human parents must be even more emotional than we thought, afraid we might hurt their precious little ones." Danny's blood went cold. The human adults had tried to warn the Vorthens, but the aliens thought it was just parent panic. They had no idea what human children were really capable of when pushed too far. The mood in the prison began to shift after that. During work time, the children moved differently. They still looked obedient, but there was something new in their eyes. When guards gave orders, the children followed them perfectly, too perfectly, like they were thinking 3 steps ahead. Jessica Martinez started teaching the younger children new games during their brief recreation periods. These looked like innocent fun to the watching guards, but they were actually military exercises disguised as play. She taught them hand signals, silent communication, and how to move as a team without making noise. Billy Peterson began studying the guards like his doctor mother had taught him to study patience. He noticed that guard Vexcor always rubbed his left knee when it was going to rain. Guard Klexmar couldn't see well in dim light. Warden Klexvon had a bad shoulder that made him slow to turn around. All this information flowed through Katie's communication network to every child in the prison. They were building a complete picture of their enemy's weaknesses. The breaking point came during what should have been a routine punishment session. Tyler Brooks had been caught accidentally damaging some equipment, and the guards decided to make an example of him. They dragged him to the central area where all the children could see and began using their shock sticks. But something was different this time. Instead of crying and begging like the guards expected, the children watched with cold, calculating eyes. Even little Danny stood perfectly still, showing no fear at all. The guard began to feel uncomfortable under those steady stares. When they released Tyler, he walked back to his place without limping, even though the shocks had hurt terribly. He looked at his fellow prisoners and nodded slightly. The message was clear. They were done being victims. The real war was about to begin. The rebellion began at exactly 3 a.m, when most of the night shift guards were half asleep at their posts. Alex Chun had spent weeks studying the prison's power system during his repair duties, mapping every wire and circuit in his mind. Now, hidden in a maintenance tunnel, he carefully disconnected the cables he had marked days earlier. Half the prison plunged into darkness. Emergency lights flickered on, casting strange red shadows through the corridors. Alarms started wailing as confused guards stumbled around, trying to figure out what had gone wrong. In the chaos, no one noticed the soft clicking sounds echoing through the walls. Katie Williams was using her tapping code to coordinate with children throughout the facility. The first phase was escape. Megan Foster had been practicing with the lock mechanisms for weeks, using a bent piece of metal she had hidden in her shoe. Her grandmother had taught her pick locks when she was little, just for fun. Now that skill became their key to freedom. Working in the dark, Megan moved from cell to cell, quietly opening doors. The children slipped out like ghosts, bare feet silent on the cold metal floors. They had practiced this moment in their minds dozens of times, using Jessica Martinez's memory games to perfect every step. Tyler Brooks took charge of the first group, 8 children between ages 10 and 15. His father's military training had included lessons about moving unseen through enemy territory. Now Tyler used those lessons to guide his friends through the maze of maintenance shafts and service corridors that Danny Williams had mapped during his weeks of invisible scouting. The armory was their first target. Tyler had watched the guards and knew exactly where they kept their weapons. More importantly, he knew the door would be locked with an electronic system that Katie had already figured out how to hack. Remember, Tyler whispered as they crawled to the narrow air ducts above the weapons room. We're not killers. We just need to level the playing field. The guards below had no idea death was crawling above their heads. These were just human children, after all. Weak, scared, broken little creatures who couldn't possibly threaten anyone. They were about to learn how wrong they were. Katie dropped down from the ceiling vent like a spider, landing silently behind the single guard on duty. Before he could turn around, she had already plugged a small device into the door control panel, something Alex had built from spare parts over the past week. The lock clicked open. The guard spun around, reaching for his alarm button, but Tyler was already there. The boy moved with a speed and precision that would have made his military father proud, striking pressure points that Billy Peterson had identified during his medical observations of Vorth anatomy. The guard collapsed, unconscious but unharmed. The children had studied their captors well enough to know exactly where to hit to disable without killing. Within minutes, they had distributed energy weapons to every child old enough to use them safely. The younger ones got communication devices and emergency supplies from the medical bay. Everyone had a job. Everyone had a purpose. The real surprise came when the guards tried to call for help. Katie had been busy with more than just locks and lights. Her weeks of computer access had taught her how the communication systems worked. Now, every time a guard tried to send a distress signal, they got nothing but static. This is impossible. Warden Klexvon screamed into his dead communicator. They're just younglings. How are they doing this? But his confusion turned to real fear when the lights came back on. Not the normal white lighting, but flashing red emergency signals that hurt Vorthan eyes. Alex had rewired more than just the power grid. Now the children controlled everything from heating to air circulation. The prison hallways became a nightmare for the guards. Every corner could hide a trap. Every doorway might be an ambush. The children used their small size to move through spaces too narrow for adult Vorthans, appearing and disappearing like deadly phantoms. Jessica Martinez had turned her teaching skills into tactical coordination. She positioned the children using hand signals and whispered commands, creating a web of coverage that caught every guard movement. When the aliens tried to regroup in the main security office, they found Billy Peterson waiting for them with a medical scanner that he had modified into a stunning device. The guards who remained conscious began to panic. These weren't the broken, frightened children they had been tormenting for weeks. These were organized, intelligent, absolutely ruthless opponents who seemed to anticipate their every move. When Captain Thexmore arrived with reinforcements from orbit, he found his mining station transformed into a fortress. Every approach was watched, every entrance was trapped, and every system was under enemy control. "Surrender now," he broadcast through the emergency speakers. "You cannot win this fight." The answer came from Katie Williams, her young voice calm and steady as it echoed through every speaker in the facility. "We already have." The children didn't just win their freedom. They changed the entire galaxy. What happened next shocked everyone, even the human rescue fleets racing toward the mining station. Katie Williams sat in the communications center she had captured, her fingers dancing across alien keyboards with the skill her programmer mother had taught her. But Katie had learned much more than programming during her weeks of imprisonment. She had discovered something the Vorthans never expected a human child to understand: how their entire communication network operated. "Are you ready?" she asked Alex Chun, who was standing beside a massive server filled with blinking lights. His weeks of studying Vorthan technology had paid off in ways no adult could have imagined. He nodded and flipped the final switch. Suddenly, every screen in Vorthan space lit up with the same image. Security camera footage from mining station Omega 12 began playing across the Empire. Millions of aliens watched in horror as the recording showed Vorthan guards beating human children, shocking them with energy weapons, and tearing families apart like they were nothing more than animals. The footage was devastating because the children had been recording everything. Billy Peterson had found the security cameras during his medical duties and made sure they captured every cruel moment. Now the entire galaxy could see the truth about the mighty Vorthan Empire. But the real earthquake came from what the recordings revealed to other enslaved species throughout Vorthan space. For generations, these aliens had been told they were weak, that resistance was impossible, that the Vorthans were too powerful to defeat. Then they watched 43 human children bring down an entire military facility. On the mining world of Zirian Prime, a species called the Crothan saw the broadcast, and something awakened in their hearts. If human younglings could fight back, why couldn't they? Within hours, Crothan workers were storming their guard posts, using mining equipment as weapons, and overwhelming their surprise captors. The rebellion spread like wildfire. On the factory moons of Sector 7, the bird-like Solari used their natural flying ability to attack Vorthan facilities from above. The aquatic Merhai flooded processing centers on 3 water worlds, while the insect-like Zektar used their tunnel networks to collapse entire bases from below. Every species had been watching, waiting, hoping for someone to prove that the Vorthans weren't invincible. The human children had given them that proof. Back on the mining station, the remaining Vorthan guards huddled in the few areas the children hadn't captured yet. Captain Thexmore, the same alien who had separated families on the colony ship, now found himself trapped in his own command center. "This is impossible," he kept repeating. "They're just human younglings. This shouldn't be happening." Tyler Brooks appeared in the doorway, no longer looking like the frightened boy who had been dragged from his father's ship weeks ago. His eyes held a coldness that made the alien captain step backward. "You're right," Tyler said calmly. "We're just children. That's what made you so stupid." Behind Tyler stood the other children, 43 young humans who had endured weeks of cruelty and emerged harder than steel. They had kept perfect records of everything: every beating, every humiliation, every crime their captors had committed. When the human rescue fleet finally arrived, led by Admiral Rebecca Stone aboard the destroyer Vengeance, they expected to find a tragedy. Instead, they found something that would become legend. The children had not only freed themselves, but had also captured 17 Vorthan personnel alive, including Captain Thexmore and Warden Klexvon. Every alien was unharmed but thoroughly defeated, held in the same cells where the children had been tortured. Status report: Admiral Stone requested as she stepped onto the station. Katie Williams, now 12 years old but looking much older, handed over a data pad filled with evidence. Mining Station Omega. 12 is secure, Admiral. All human personnel accounted for. 0 casualties on our side. The Admiral stared at the young girl in amazement. These children had accomplished something that would have challenged her best Special Forces teams. But the children's victory had consequences far beyond one mining station. The evidence they gathered led to war crimes trials that lasted for years. The rebellion they inspired brought down the Vorthan Empire within 6 months as world after world threw off their chains. Most importantly, they had sent a message that echoed across every star system. Never underestimate humanity's children. Years later, when Katie became a famous programmer, when Tyler joined the Space Marines, when Alex became an engineer and Billy became a doctor, they would remember the lesson they had learned on that cold mining station. Sometimes the most dangerous weapon in the universe isn't the biggest gun or the strongest army. Sometimes it's just a group of children who refuse to give up. The galaxy learned that lesson the hard way, and they never forgot it.